Welcome to Tomorrow Makers, where we explore how we learn, live, work, and play now and in the future. I'm Summer Beatty.
And I'm Carlos Ramos. Hey, Summer, I got a question for you. How are you at planning?
I think I'm a good planner.
Good planner?
Yeah.
So emergency situation, what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. It's strange because I actually feel like I jump into action. There was a car one time. I was in an apartment in Lewisburg when we lived there. A car went by. I heard all this commotion, like people screaming. And I looked out, and these people were chasing a dog back and forth. So it had gotten loose, and this was a busy street, and they're chasing this dog back and forth. My heart's thumping, and I'm like, oh my gosh. The dog gets hit by a car. It was awful.
No.
I grabbed the quilt off my bed and I ran down, and these people were freaking out. I went and I was like telling people in their cars, pull over, a dog's been hit. I give them my blanket off my bed, and they took the dog, away. But it was one of those cases where it's like, fight or flight, like just jumping into action, like someone's dog got hit. I don't know. I think I'd be okay in that situation. As we were having our guests speak to us, I was like, oh, I think this sounds like a pretty fun career path.
Yeah. Well, you're not going off that career path because I need you working that.
Well, there's a little emergency management in every arena.
Absolutely. We won't even get into that here. We have Will Schlosser here, faculty for emergency management and homeland security. This is a fantastic, I always say this is a fantastic one, but this is.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's like, what hasn't he done? He's been an assistant principal. He's managed all of these operations. He's been a band director. It's like, the more we talk to him, we're like, oh my goodness, how are you not 90 years old? Like,
I know.
And he's not old. Like, what the heck? He's just had so many cool experiences.
Yeah. No need for us to belabor it. We're just going to jump right in. We're not even going to introduce him once we get back to it. So, Will Schlosser, Emergency Management, Homeland Security, on Tomorrow Makers. Here we go. My gosh, Will, what have you not done?
I've never flown in a helicopter.
You've never flown in a helicopter?
Correct.
Oh my gosh, that is so bizarre, especially knowing some of the aspects of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, I think you can check that box off really soon.
I highly doubt it.
No?
There's a whole lot of paperwork that goes with that.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because of all the liabilities involved.
Okay. I know we were really close to, this was like this is in 2020. We were, January 2020, we were scheduled to join Army ROTC in the Chinooks that they would take between our campus, Mansfield. I don't know if they actually landed over in Lock Haven or if the Lock Haven cadets came over here and then they flew up to Mansfield. But one or two of us in marketing were going to be embedded with the team.
Oh, yeah.
And we had that clearance to go. And then you know what happened in 2020.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. So those requests actually get routed up through the Department of the Army. And then they actually go to the Pentagon at this point to be approved every single time. So that chain takes a while. It was interesting. We flew... So one of the things you have in there, Operation Crosstail, but that's part of an air defense mission that we run. And so we had, if you look up the Today Show, Ted Rosson Reports, we flew an air defense mission with him out of State College. Ted Rosson is a pilot. So I'm like, I want to fly. And they're like, yeah, no. I've flown on the Target aircraft a bunch because I'm a rated observer. But when you put other people in those planes, the approvals are through the roof to get it. But PR is one of the ones that you can get pretty quickly.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Okay,
so there's our in.
Yeah, and there's your in too. So we'll just keep you in mind if we need extra help here on staff.
I can shoot a DSLR pretty decently.
Okay.
There we go.
Good.
I'll opt out of a helicopter ride.
You're not in?
I could take it or leave it. It sounds like he really wants to go.
Have you been there, done that thing, or no? You haven't.
No, I haven't.
Do you like flying?
In a commercial airplane? I mean, it's okay. I'm not afraid of it.
How about a little plane?
Never done it. I heard that's completely different.
It is 100% different.
Lots of movement.
Can be.
Lots of feelings.
Oh, there is.
My husband one of his professors in college had a little airplane, and he took students up, which I'm sure is not allowed. It wasn't Pennsylvania College of Technology. It was a different institution.
All the disclaimers.
Yeah, but he was like, oh, I was so nauseous the whole time.
Yeah, my only experience was to go up and jump out of it. It was a tandem jump, which, so, I'm still a bundle of nerves. I'm like, hey, we're going up, to 10,000, 12,000 feet, and, then to willingly just dump out of it. And it was really fun because it wasn't like you just...
That's one definition.
But it wasn't like, okay, you're just on the edge, at least for this particular one. Wasn't like you were on the edge and you made the decision to jump out. They put you on the edge. But then they didn't push you. They tilted the plane.
Oh, yeah.
Dumped you.
Yeah.
Did they
Nice.
tell you in advance?
Yeah, they let us know exactly how that was going to go.
Oh, okay.
I wonder why you do that.
Well, so I guess, so you don't freak out and try to, like a cat, try to claw back onto the edge of whatever it is that you're at. But it was a real graceful experience. Now we dumped right into a cloud. So, and
Moist.
Yeah, moist, and then the whole immediately your ears go, and you're like, oh, the pain of the ears, and they tell you to do one thing, and I'm like, this isn't working. This is making it worse. So I did the opposite thing, and for me that was like, oh, great, instant relief. But yeah, I guess everyone's a little different.
Interestingly, I am deathly afraid of heights, but I love flying.
Oh, wow. You feel safe.
Trust the physics.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can we rewind a little bit? Because you said earlier it kind of seemed like you might be inviting me to take a plane ride, or was I misinterpreting
We can
that?
absolutely take you up.
Do you have, in what?
Well, we could do a PR flight for CAP. I mean, we can probably get that done pretty easily.
A PR flight for what?
Civil Air Patrol.
Oh, okay. What kind of PR?
So we do a thing called Fly a Teacher. So anybody that's involved in education, we can take up and experience flight in STEM.
Oh,
So it's
fun.
to
Okay.
fly around the campus, take pictures of the campus, come back.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in.
Sure. When do you want to do that? Maybe.
I don't know. I'll have to talk to my director of
Summertime?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Later.
Actually, when's the best time to fly is in the winter. The planes this is going to sound odd. The propellers are much more aggressive in the air because of the density of the air. So the planes just lift off. You have a higher max load. It's cooler all around, so there's less turbulence. So today is going to be an awful day to go flying because there'll be a significant difference in the air temperature versus the ground temperature. And so that's what causes turbulence. So at 3,000 feet, it'll be
Okay, I like the
Above your
3,000. I'm comfortable with that. But this talk of 10,000, I was like, I know how high 10,000 feet is.
There's
That's
no difference in 3,000 and 10,000 if things go wrong.
oxygen.
Right. Yeah, the oxygen
the
aspect.
oxygen.
I'm thinking
There is
some of
that.
those hills in Colorado are
Oh, yeah.
over
Yeah, but
10,000 plus.
Yeah, you can still breathe at 10,000. And
It's impacted.
Yeah.
I feel it a little bit.
yeah, do you?
Yeah.
At 10,000 feet, you're only allowed to fly up there for 15, 20 minutes without supplemental oxygen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that's what you jumped out of.
Yeah.
Wow. That's why they dumped you. There's no time to hold on. It was like, we gotta
guess
get these people out of here and get back down. Oh my goodness. So all this conversation, I have to wrap my mind around what your position entails. You know so much about so many different things. So holy cow. Okay.
Don't tell my wife.
So just for our listeners, I think we need to introduce you and set that stage because we just kind of jumped into it.
And I'm liking this
You
model.
like that? Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's cool. But I'm thinking they're going to see your photo. They're going to see your name. They know who you are, but we just.
And I think we tell them before we actually get into this.
Well,
but if you wanted to.
No, it's cool. I'm thinking emergency management and homeland security.
Hi, my name is Will.
I know, no, it's cool. I just feel like I want to kind of have you tell us what is emergency management and homeland security because it's so vast, and hearing you speak is making me even realize how more vast it is.
Yeah, so emergency management and homeland security as a career field, if you think of it as anything that can affect life or property or your program. So we tend to take a look at those things and go, okay, what could go wrong? And then once you figure out what could go wrong, then you figure out what can you do to prevent that from happening. It's called mitigation. So a good example here in campus is the fire systems. Right. We know that buildings have fires in them, historically speaking. So that's a threat. It's a hazard. So some emergency manager somewhere went, how do we make this not happen? Well, fire sprinklers, fire alarms, things like that. There hasn't been a fire death in a school in Pennsylvania since the 50s. That's because we took a look at it and went, this is a problem. How do we fix it? We do fire drills. We have doors that automatically close. So that's one aspect. Another big example you could use is the levee system here. So the levee system, we haven't had a major flood in Williamsport proper. Down south of Williamsport's a little bit different, but Williamsport proper since the 70s. It's because we put the levee system in, because flooding caused so much damage here. So it really, anything that you can consider a hazard, we try to go in and figure out why would it happen and what can we do to prevent it from happening. Even so much as like banks have emergency managers. How do we reduce risk to our financial institutions? So part of it's a physical structure, but maybe it's an investment structure, or if this person isn't available to us, who's the number two? So identifying all those things ahead of time.
How do you even get in your car every day? I mean, is that trickle into your daily life? Like, are you always thinking about what could go wrong? How do I make sure something can be prevented? Or
no, but that's part of the fun of it, right? Like,
I know you're a very relaxed person. I've not met you, but I was like thinking, what does this entail? What does a person who manages emergencies and plans for them? Are they like a very almost like a accountant-like person, or trying to think through all that? But you seem very relaxed. I feel like you're good with just uncertainty.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the thing that we do really well, we're really good project managers in really stressful situations. So I don't get upset almost at anything. It's very hard to get me anxious about anything, really. It certainly happens, and I try to avoid it. And that's done through training. Like, you just put yourself in stressful situations enough that you're like, okay, this is just running the program again. So there's processes that we do. There's a thing called the planning P that in my life I use all the time. There's also a thing called the OODA loop. So if you're in business or a fighter pilot, the OODA loop is something that's very, very familiar to you, which is just a continuous improvement cycle. So you observe your situation, you orient yourself to what your options are, decide on one, then do it, and then you've got a new situation because something has changed. So if you look at life like that, then, okay, if it didn't work, what's the next time around?
Make it sound so simple.
Here's hoping.
Why doesn't the everyday person know about this? I think that would ease some anxiety overall. Maybe.
Yes. I was kind of thinking that. It's like, how do you because we will, if we try to go into that cycle is something that we're passionate about doing in a business or in a personal sense. I mean, you're still doing work. You're doing work just like we would do, but I think you've got to keep yourself there. Is there an emotional detachment in these cases, or you're just so practiced and trained that you're able to separate that out?
I think realizing that humans are important is a really huge aspect of our career. So I think one of the stories that I tell often in class is Hurricane Sandy. So I went through, and I was a brand new incident commander during Hurricane Sandy, and New Jersey pretty much got a lot of water, and there was a lot of destruction. So they actually ran out, our organization ran out of incident commanders that were available, that were qualified to the level that needed to be. So I said, yep, I can come over and help. So I went to McGuire Air Force Base, got into the ops center there, and just evaluated, right? So the first thing I did is I went to the incident commander that was there, and we do what's called a change of command. So what's the current situation? What assets do you have? What are you planning? What's the money situation? All that kind of stuff. He was not really able to tell me anything. He was just too tired. He was done. So I'm like, okay, let's go for a walk. So we went for a walk around the block, and then we sat down in his office, closed the door, and then we started the conversation again, much more productive, right? And so then coming back out, I started talking with the rest of the staff. We started getting all the processes, just like I said before, with the OODA loop, going through and getting everything set up. We got to the end of the day, and I was like, okay, so our start time tomorrow is 06. Let's make sure everyone's rested and ready to go. And everyone kind of looked at each other, and I'm like, okay, I don't know any of you, but that's not the normal look. And they're like, yeah, our homes are gone. We don't have any place to go. And I'm like, oh, okay. So moving on, what's our next step? Okay, we need to get bedding here. We need to get foods here. And so you start to just go, how do you make life okay for a closer circle? That was one of my first really major operations. And so you start to have that emotional intelligence about your situation next to you. And being empathetic to that helps you on a broader scale. Then knowing that, hey, for me, I need to go for a hike after I get back, which was really an interesting story because I live up near Wellsboro, PA. So I went for a hike in the Grand Canyon. And there's a visitor center at the top. And I was just kind of sitting there looking at some maps. And there were two guys there. And this is just when I came back from McGuire. And I'm like, hey, where are you from? Struck up a conversation. They're like, yeah, we're from Jersey, but we're not really sure what's happened to our houses. And I still had all the access to all of my photos because what we did was we made a photo mosaic from Cape May to Cape Cod, 10 miles deep. So we could take a look at damage on any particular property, right? And so I was able to pull their property up.
Whoa.
And they're like, it's gone. I'm like, yep, it is definitely gone. I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, this is great. We actually know now. So we'll just hike and then we'll find a hotel and we'll call our insurance company. I'm like, great. Here's the public facing website that you can go to prove your property damage. So yeah, a lot of the stuff we do is hard. So you got to take care of yourself. But there's also an enormous benefit, even if it's bad. It's a lot of times it's closure to people. So.
Okay, so good to know that someone that does have that high emotional capacity, they'll thrive in this position as long as they have that self-care component.
100%. You can get burned out really easily too. So I've seen guys they burn and burn and burn, and then they're done. So if you want to be a long duration, you got to make sure that you take care of yourself for sure.
Now, in my inadvertent research for this, because it wasn't absolutely non-intentional, I was listening to another podcast, People I Mostly Admire, with Steve Levitt, and he was interviewing, what was the name? Raj Shah, who had been tapped by Obama, if I remember everything correctly, to head the response for the Haiti earthquake. And just the way he was talking about the operations and just how quickly things had to ramp up. But that same thing of, getting, making those connections to who would be on the ground normally to support those things and to find out those people are gone. Mm-hmm. They were victims of the earthquake.
Yeah, it's really an interesting thing. And when you talk about islands, it's a little bit different too. So I had the privilege of working in I wasn't in Puerto Rico, but working with Puerto Rico during Hurricane Irma and Maria. What we do, what Civil Air Patrol does mostly is aerial imagery. We also do some local level disaster recovery, like sandbag operations, go and see critical infrastructure, make sure it's okay. But it was really interesting because I'd never been to Puerto Rico, really don't know anything about Puerto Rico, didn't know that Puerto Rico was going to be my problem. Mm-hmm. But if you look at FEMA regions, my position at the time was this is a really long title, Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations for the Northeast region. Basically what that meant was I was in charge of all operations from Pennsylvania into the Northeast United States for CAP. And Puerto Rico, obviously not that. But FEMA regions, FEMA Region 2 is New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I get this phone call saying, hey, are you ready for this hurricane? And my reply back was, yeah, but it's like a week and a half away. They're like, oh no, Puerto Rico. And I'm like, not me. They're like, oh, it's you. Oh, okay. So then I had to make connections into Puerto Rico. And what I quickly realized is I don't speak Spanish. And so there weren't any qualified incident commanders there that spoke English. All of the people in the wing were all Spanish speaking natively. So I'm like, okay. And primarily that wing at the time ran cadet programs, but not necessarily emergency services like we do CONUS or in the continental United States. So to your point, we reached out really quickly. And from across the nation, we found people that were interpreters. We found other assets to talk to us from the island itself that would speak English and would be part of that incident management team. We got them just-in-time training for how to use their cameras a little bit differently than they had done before, how to use all the FEMA stuff, what the radio operations would look like. And so right after landfall, there was this massive effort from New York City to Arizona to Puerto Rico to get them back up so that we would have communications with the island to figure out where we could land Marines and Air Force personnel to get them back up and running. And it was like 6 months that we worked that operation. But it was whole of government, whole of community. It was really awesome.
And how quickly that gets turned around is, to me, amazing. Because, I think about what we do in our everyday work, and it's like, okay, we might be able to get this ready to get started in 3 weeks. And you guys are like, okay, we're past the hump, and now now we've got to make sure we're continuing services and rebuilding and.
Yeah, there's a thing called community lifelines. That's a really good guideline. So community lifelines are different sectors of your daily life that if you can look at it and say, okay, health and safety, if I can get that lifeline good, I'm good. If I can do transportation, I'm good. So it's a good way to just look at it. And then you just keep on running around the circle. Next lifeline, keep on going.
I think the key here is planning. As long as you have a plan in place and you have all these structures and these tools that you rely on to make everything feel a little more comfortable, or you feel more prepared at least when disaster happens.
Yep. Emergency management is 99% planning. We call them blue sky days and gray sky days. Blue sky days, there's a lot of office work. You're going through, you're identifying resources, you're identifying problems and going, okay, if this happens, this is what I'm going to do. Knowing that every single plan you make is going to be wrong. And so like when you come to that realization that the plan is wrong, right at the front end, because there's some difference in the situation. You could have planned for 3 inches of snow, but you got 5. And so that's going to change your plans, it's going to change your timelines. That gives you the flexibility to go around and adapt a plan. And I think that's really what makes successful emergency managers are they're planning at the front end, and then they're adapting their plans through.
It would also seem like you're not shaken by things because you've experienced kind of the worst, right?
She just called me old.
No, I'm not saying you're old, but it does feel like, I know I've not been in emergency situations like you have, but it's almost like your body's like, well, I've done this before. I'm good. Like, I know I've done this, so I can also do this, right? So I'm thinking about preparing these students for these crazy situations they're going to be in. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's interesting because so I'm going to take a step back further in my career. I was a band director for 13 years and a middle school band director for 13 years and an elementary band director for 13 years. Elementary students there is nothing you can say to them that they will follow directly. I tell my Homeland Security class, I'm like, I'm qualified to teach Homeland Security because I taught kindergarten for a year. And they're just so like, hey, do this. And you turn around, you come back and they're completely doing something else. And you're like, So you've got to adapt the plan over and over and over again. So the more times your brain does that, and it doesn't necessarily need to be in a critical situation, but it needs to be in a flexible situation. So interestingly, I had some time where I was working at Pima and we were all just kind of sitting, talking back and forth. And we found out that most of us were professional musicians. And just that trait of being able to go through and adapt to the people around you as they played, and you're fitting into that group organically. It was just an interesting side note that all of us were that.
Yeah, maybe not a coincidence either.
Right. Yeah, it was interesting. Doesn't mean you have to be, right? We have plenty of emergency managers who are not musicians, but at that particular time and that day, all 6 of us were professional musicians.
Maybe a good interview question if you
What do you play?
Yes.
Right. But then you get into, hey, I've had these experiences, and you just get used to some of the stressors and also how to deal with the stressors afterwards.
You mentioned that you were involved with hurricane work. Are there any other, is that sort of a specialty area, or does that's kind of just where your path was in the past, or any other kinds of interesting things that...
One of our biggest hazards is water. So that's why it comes that way. Flooding is the number one natural hazard in Pennsylvania. Hurricane Irma and Maria in Puerto Rico was an anomaly for me. Although last year it was kind of interesting. Because of advances in technology, I actually ran an air operation in Florida from my classroom. So the students could see it in real time. Because we have a radio system that I can jump on the internet and talk to planes. Because of the repeater system and how it's all laid out. So they could hear in real time, okay, this is what an operations check is. This is what a damage report is. This is how we work in operational cycles. So that was super interesting. Again, a hurricane.
Yeah.
For a long time, I worked in counter-drug operations. So we gridded out Pennsylvania looking for illegal marijuana grows primarily, but also some drug houses and things like that. So it's the same setup, right? You have to create an operations plan, execute on the plan, and go from there. So that was an interesting thing. And civilian side of life, I also am an emergency manager for the borough of Mansfield. So working through, we had a boil water advisory. Why did that happen? How do we fix it? What are some redundancies in the system that we need to put in place in the future? We have a major issue right now with flooding. As the world gets a little warmer, we have more intense rains that are statistically, we can take a look. But 4 inches per hour is something that is not uncommon anymore. It's not every day, but once every 2 or 3 years, which that used to be once every 100 years. So we have to change some of our stormwater management systems. We have to reroute some rivers. So we're in the process of trying to figure out how do you get $15 million to do that so that we don't flood every year. So those are some of the projects that I'm working on currently.
Yeah, that's really cool that we have this at Penn College, that faculty with real world experience avenue where, students aren't in a classroom, just on their own in a textbook. They're listening to your stories. They're, hearing you speak with airplane pilots. Like, how cool is that? I'm sure that experience in the classroom really pays off. And I think you're also planning a big event here on campus.
Yeah, it's a little one. Yeah, Rotorfest is actually in a couple weeks. And this was an interesting story because of my connections with the National Guard. A couple years ago, I was sitting in my office in the Columbia Academic Center, and I noticed this Black Hawk was flying pretty low to campus. And it always catches my ear when there's anything flying in the air. So I'll go take a look, right? And it kept on circling. And I'm like, and the door is open. Something's strange. So they're looking for something. So on my drive back to Mansfield, I called one of my friends who is a Black Hawk pilot and said, "Hey, was that you flying over Penn College?" And he said, "Yeah, I was looking for you. I knew that you were starting work there, and I wanted to see if we could find you." So we had a good laugh over it. And then we started talking. Wouldn't it be cool, because he's a Penn College grad, wouldn't it be cool to bring helicopters back on campus? And it would be an operation for us. So talk about real life experience here at the college. Yeah, Rotorfest is really cool. The primary purpose of Rotorfest is for my incident command class to run an operation. So they will start at 5 o'clock in the morning. We've been planning for a couple of weeks now of where do you put each of the helicopters? Why are you putting them there? Where do you put the ground assets? What is the timing of everything? For example, there are 4 helicopters that are scheduled to come in. Some of them have a lead time of 2 hours for flight. If you track that back, though, you get into what's called duty day restrictions. So you have to figure out, where does the pilot live? Then how long does it take them to get to the airfield? How long does it take them to prep the airplane and then come here and then go back? So if that's longer than 10 hours, that's going to restrict your landing time. So we go through that all with all the students so that they create the schedule for the day and then they run the day. So you'll see our mobile command post out front with a bunch of students in it. It looks like they're moving different cards on different boards. They're really just tracking assets as they're coming in and out, making sure that everyone's on the right frequencies, tracking costs for things, tracking meals, stuff like that. So it's really cool. We'll have over 600 high school kids here on campus, which is awesome. We're estimating between 2,000 and 3,000 other people coming to campus and our students coming out. Really, it's for the 20 students that are in my incident command class.
That's what you need, though. You need other people involved. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is your second year,
yep.
Right? Okay. So things could go wrong. Did anything go wrong last year, or is everything pretty according to plan?
We're not going to ask that question.
No, I think, though, sometimes I've told people who are planning events before, not, weddings or whatever, something's going to go wrong. There's always a hiccup, right?
Yep. Yeah, so last year, the big hiccups were timing, having people come in at the right times, which then messes up placement. So trying to figure out, okay, where do I put that ground asset for the next 2 hours because you got here really early?
Right, and that's the real learning experience. How do you handle that?
Yep. So I'm not going to call out who that was.
No, we don't need names. I just assumed that something probably, and that was a great experience.
Yep, and another thing we cleared, so every time you land a helicopter, you have to make sure that the ground is okay. So you do a quick sweep to make sure there's no rocks or people didn't drop a pencil or something like that, so it doesn't fly away and hurt somebody, right? So the life flight was supposed to come in. They called in. Hey, we're coming. We're cleared the whole area out. They were right on top of us. And then my phone rang, and it was the life flight manager saying they're about to turn. They've got to go do a patient transport. So they literally were hovering over us, turned, and went to the hospital. And it happens, right? So you just adjust. And so we told students, okay, that's not going to be here. But then we had a short story of this is why. These are all emergency response personnel. And at any point in time, that's what we do. When something bad happens, we go try to make it a little bit better.
Such a cool career field. And I don't think that's your area is something that somebody would naturally think of when they're trying to figure out what career paths they might, want to pursue. How do you even, explain that to someone? Or are there other areas that might be more traditional that are segues into what you're doing? Or It's just so unique.
It is. We have a lot of people get into the field from the first responder field, and we're not first responders. A lot of people have that confusion, right? First responders, traditionally, you've got fire, police, EMS, emergency medical services. We're the people behind the scenes, making sure that all that stuff's working. And when it gets a little bit longer, we'll come in and organize it and make sure that that's okay. So there's an enormous amount of people that are interested in that, but then interested in the project management, interested in first response work, but interested in project management or being in charge of that organization. That's when we start talking about emergency management and homeland security.
Yeah, there's probably some crossover for sure, just
100%.
in those two fields.
Yeah, one of the hardest things that we as instructors deal with is trying to get that first responder they're really awesome at fixing it. Coming all the way back up to 30,000 feet going, okay, your job's not to fix it. Your job is to make sure that it's managed correctly. So you can't just jump in there.
Oh, that'd be hard, though. I mean, you see blood and you're like, that's my job. I need to do something. No, there are other people who can do that.
Yeah, a good case and example, we did a mass casualty exercise here on campus last year. And we did it in conjunction with our paramedic science. And some of our students cross over. So they're emergency managers and paramedics. The paramedics all went out to the mock scene that we did, but the emergency managers were in the emergency operations center on campus, our simulated one. And we went over, okay, what's the dispatch like? What extra resources are you going to need? But then after that, how do you repair the part of campus where that event happened? How do you bring students back to class? What resources do you need for continuity of education? Like all of those follow-on things, which is it's really interesting to a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, that we do all these types of hands-on. You're not just in the emergency operations center. You're doing the Rotor Fest. You're doing all these activities. What does that emergency operations center look like?
It's not very exciting. It's really just a classroom with a lot of computer screens, and some of our procedures are on big maps on the wall.
Okay.
So it's just constant reminders of these are the things. What's really exciting is we're moving. So right now we have a temporary classroom and we're outfitting a new classroom, which is going to have a dedicated emergency operations center, which will look more like a traditional emergency operations center. A traditional emergency operations center is still just a room with a lot of projection capability and a lot of communications capability. So it'll be interesting in our new space where we have some flexible seating options, which is, again, traditionally what you see. You've got a whole lot more big screen monitors so you can do real-time weather and real-time incident management. I'm excited that we currently have a software package called WebEOC. We're adding another one called D4H that are just used in the field, right? So our students are going to have the ability to manipulate those systems and put them up on big screens like we do in the real world.
So that typical day in an emergency management homeland security class is not really just sitting in, kids in the row, looking up at the professor, going like this. It's really engaging in constant activity.
Yeah, we generally have a project every day that we're doing. On our normal days, we have 1.5-hour classes. It depends. So history class, when we study history, there's a whole lot of, we need to talk this one through. But we also take field trips. So I'll be taking my students here soon to Johnstown. Johnstown was the biggest flood death in the United States in 1889. What's really neat is our students get to go and actually stand on the dam that failed. Like it's still there. So we talk about all the different things that failed there. It's different when you get to see it and you can be like, oh, that's how big the spillway was. And that's why it was a problem that they put a net there. So we try to make it as hands-on as possible in all our classes.
And so I would suspect then, like in any large organization, I mean, you don't wait for the emergency to happen.
Oh, definitely not.
There's a lot of preparation and practice that's happening in every organization. I know I'm part of the emergency management team here, and we do the annual or semi biannual, whatever that is, tabletop exercise. And I know that there's lots of exercises that are happening that are the tactical police are doing their thing. When students aren't here, they'll commandeer a building or a whole part of campus and run exercises. So that's pretty typical in a large organization, right?
Very. Yeah, and that's what an emergency manager does, is organize those exercises. You're not going to be the everything to everyone. You're going to be the connective tissue that everyone comes in and sees. So you have to have kind of an experiential level with everything. So For example, we just did public information officer training in one of my classes where every student got up and gave a press release and then answered questions from the simulated press. They're probably not going to be that person, but they're probably going to be the person that preps that person. So if they don't know what's going to happen, they're going to do a poor job preparing that person. So those are the kind of things that we do. And you're talking about exercises. There's a process called HSEEP, which goes all the way from, hey, we're going to talk about how we're going to plan it to full-scale exercises. You run that whole range all the time. And it's like everything else we do, it's a cycle. So you're continually improving all the different processes.
I would think there's some crossover into the business world for these individuals with this skill set too. I mean, I'm sure they're going into more typical positions like you described, but where all do graduates typically go?
It's interesting, post-COVID, everywhere.
Okay.
Because everyone kind of realized, this is a skill set that we can use in a wide range of different businesses. So our graduates, we have graduates at the National Security Agency. We also have graduates at the National Beef Packing Plant. So some go into banking, some go into private consulting. We have a couple that just recently got hired as county emergency management coordinators. So if you name an organization, it probably has some sort of risk involved in it, which means you need somebody to manage that risk. Also, one of my specialties is school security and safety. I've been an emergency management coordinator for a school district for the last 15 or so years. That just became a requirement that every school district has to have a school safety and security coordinator. So you see the Commonwealth start to build what that model looks like. We're not all the way through it, but that will be another career field opportunity for some of our students.
Now, you mentioned COVID. How much of a role do emergency managers play in a disaster of that scale that's health related? I can think of some ways, but then in other ways, I'm like, no, this is a different skill set.
Two different ways to look at that. For COVID, it was part of the busiest time of my life. So if you think about how a school system works, it's pretty traditional, right? Students get on a bus, they come to school, they get education, they leave. We've been doing it for a couple hundred years, not real hard. However, when you're put into the place of, hey, I can't have kids in the building, how do you do that? Well, that's when you start to look at an emergency manager. How do I go through and get to students? So for part of my career or part of my time there, it was actually organizing the school district's operations. So people got pretty locked up. Like they just didn't, we talk about the process. The process just stopped. Everyone's like, we don't know what to do. Okay, well, here's the process. Where are we at? And what are our key components that we need? What are our community lifelines for the school? So we identified those. And part of that was reaching out to students' homes where there wasn't internet access. That's actually an emergency management function, is dealing with communication systems. So part of my job, I was an assistant principal, but I was also trying to figure out, okay, with this telecommunications company, can I have another repeater on top of this antenna to shoot down into this small valley so that I can provide internet resources to the 3 students that are there? And then can I park a bus with a MiFi over here so that I can pay people to park a bus so that they can have a job and I can get access to these students? And then we started talking with actually a company out of Penn State University that does distance education. So we reformed how our educational delivery happened so that even if students didn't have internet access, they could drive by our buildings and get the materials transferred automatically. So there was a whole lot of emergency management functions that are just kind of embedded into it.
That's wild. You've brought up so many things that are just happening in our civilization that I am not aware that there are people that are doing these things. We just kind of take it for granted that, okay, yeah, everything's going to work out, everything's going to flow. But no, there's a lot of intentionality by some really key people like you. So thank you for doing that.
It's a lot of fun.
And how lucky was the school district to just happen to have you as an assistant principal? Seriously.
I don't know if that's luck.
Well, no, I mean, everybody's got a different personality, different skill set. That's not what's required in your education for a principal.
It is not.
So I think that was pretty key that you happen to have that background.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're starting to have conversations here at the college of, can we take that and share that with more educators? Because in education administration, you deal with the nuts and bolts, right? Like what are certifications, what's student discipline, what's laws. where, how do you schedule your day? And truly, it's not that different from emergency management, but it uses a slightly different language. So I run a class with education professionals on how you run an assembly using the incident command system. And they're like, oh, that makes total sense. I'm like, great, do it at least once a year so that you keep the chops up of learning the cycle and running the cycle.
Yeah. So as I said before, I feel like there's so many applications across all these different industries, like business, and not just the school, but like everybody should have access to the processes that you're using, I think, in some way, shape, or form, but maybe with a different language or, like you said, different terms. And
that's actually part of our challenge, is because our degree, if you look up emergency management coordinator, there's a bunch of jobs there, but not a ton. But if you look at who hires emergency managers, there's thousands and thousands of people hiring those, but they all have a different title. So it's a little bit hard to categorize. So risk manager is probably going to be an emergency manager. Safety coordinator is probably going to be an emergency manager. A friend of mine is an emergency manager for the Department of Homeland Security in Customs and Border Patrol. He works in HR. And his whole skill set is making sure that the people that are getting hired are the right people to make decisions. And when they don't, what's the fallout? And how do we manage that part of it? So the business continuity part of Customs and Border Patrol.
Any stories of students? You mentioned a couple different places where students were working. Do you have anybody that you've been in contact with and they're sharing what they're doing with you? It just makes you feel really good about everything.
When we have new students coming to campus, I tell them one of my biggest frustrations is that my senior year students are getting hired before they graduate. And so they flip over into our online program, but literally 4 or 5 of our graduates in this past year cycle have gotten jobs in the field before they even graduated, and then were able to keep it because they finished out the degree. But we have one that's doing emergency communications in a county in the lower right side of the state. So that's awesome that he's reaching out to schools and he's reaching out to local community groups to say, hey, if something bad happens, here's what to do. But we have graduates that are working right here in Lycoming County. So 2 of our graduates from last year are now the primary emergency management coordinator and primary planner for the county, which is super exciting because they came back and they said, hey, here's what we need in the county. Can you have your students now help the county out? And that's providing just more internship opportunities and more professional growth for the first responders that are in the county to interact with the college and just get better together, which is awesome.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, because I hadn't thought about it this way. I know we have the online program, but it's cool. I know you're saying I wish I didn't leave so soon, but if somebody does get that job offer, they can switch to the online program.
Yeah. In fact, I have a junior in the online program right now because she's doing an internship with a hospital system in rural Pennsylvania, redeveloping all of their emergency operations plans for all their small facilities. So she's there all the time. That's probably going to turn into a career for her. They seem to, when I talk to the internship supervisor, they're really liking the work that she's doing. She's really liking it. That's probably going to end up as a job, and then she'll just finish out online. So that has been the model, actually, that's been used repeatedly in my last year and a half here.
That's amazing. That would be really interesting to figure out how to extend that model to others where, you're in school for 2 years and then you finish out the 2 years or however long that might take to finish out that bachelor's degree.
Yep.
Working, like you say, it's an internship, but I mean, if an internship that sounds like it's actually developed properly.
Correct.
You're in there doing real work.
Which is really interesting because a lot of traditional models, you're saying, okay, here's the internships you can apply to. And that's not our model. Our model is, okay, student, what are you interested in? Find some companies that you might want to intern with, and then we'll make contact with that company and say, hey, here's what we are. This is what the student can bring. Do you want an intern? And almost exclusively, companies are like, yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's just a different way of looking at it. So far, it's been fantastic.
You've got extensive experience, not just in your field, but so many other fields that you've already talked about. Have you had mentors throughout this process?
Oh, absolutely. So you don't ever get through it. So in the field, so there's the traditional mentor, right? Like you have qualifications that you have to do, which means you have tasks that you have to do, which means you have someone qualified in those tasks that takes you through the thing, right? But there are absolutely those people that I have attached myself to and went, hey, I need someone to tell me I'm wrong. I need someone to call when I just need to complain about something, and you can be like, yeah, that's great. It doesn't matter. Get over it. Let's go. And there's, I always tell my students, I'm like, there are two big business mentors for me that if they called me and said, hey, I've got this menial job that you need to pay me for, but I need somebody to do it. Will you do it? Absolutely. And so those are the people that I model for my students, saying these are the attributes. This is why that I consider these people my mentors and would work for them for nothing. So I'm very blessed to have those types of humans in my life.
So valuable, and whoever you are in whatever industry you're in.
It's interesting. I just had an extended conversation. So Civil Air Patrol is 65,000 people across the country. And one of the things that we try to do all the time is create a mentorship program. And the conversation that I have is any organic program is going to be far better than any structural program in place. So you've got to make whatever your organization is, you have to make it the culture of mentorship. And that's when you truly get the benefit from it. It can't be a checkbox thing.
No, and you almost have to have that mentor to know the value of it, to know how important it is for you to take that role on.
Yep.
And if you don't, then you wouldn't see the value in it, maybe.
Correct.
Any suggestions for someone who's considering this field?
Come to us. Come to one of our summer camps, come for one of our activities, come talk to one of our students. It's an amazing career field that's super exciting and really, really gratifying. Sometimes it's hard, but it's so awesome to get through something really bad and make it better for the people that are involved.
And that's not just the 16, 17-year-old.
No, it's anybody from like, I started in teaching search and rescue as a Boy Scout, actually. And so then that was me at 14, and just I got involved with a local SAR group, and then there was for me Boy Scouts, but people can do volunteer firefighting. They can help with their local emergency manager doing whatever project is there. There's always something to do to get involved.
And you have people that are in your program that have come from other lines of or other career paths.
Very much so. It's interesting. We're starting to get a lot of cross majors, students that are in other majors that want to have an emergency management minor, or find, hey, this, I want to actually primarily do this. But it's interesting to your point, like people see the value in the program part of it. I want to do this other thing, but I want that training to make sure that I'm really effective in that other thing.
And we do have a minor?
We do.
Oh, cool. And the summer camp option, do you do an overnight summer camp?
We don't yet. That's in the plans for next summer.
Oh, okay.
But we do it as part of the My Tomorrow Makers.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I'm doing a couple other just in the area. There's some first responder camps that are out there with different organizations. So I'll go out with our mobile command post and be like, this is emergency management as part of the day.
Okay, that's great. And we'll include some links to different resources in the podcast notes.
Cool.
Great. Any last message?
Be safe.
Thank you so much. That
Thank you,
was fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Check out our show notes for bookmarks to your favorite sections and links to resources that we mentioned in today's episode.
You can also find past episodes and see what's on deck for upcoming ones at pct.edu/podcast.
And of course, we are open to your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, so send those over at podcast@pct.edu.
It's been real.
Catch you next time.
Can I have a restroom break right now? Like, no.